The F-14 is making some cool progress. We've got all the air system done in the last video. This video, it's all about electronics and our final organizing. So let's dive back in to this beautiful SKYMASTER F-14 XXL aircraft. Last video, all about the air system. Air system is done. We cycled the gear at the end of the last video. Now it's time to work on that mess right there. So we've got all the electronics to finish up. We still have a bunch of wires to run and things to figure out. So lots to cover in this video. It's going to be a jam-packed one. All right, so generally at this time in the builds, I usually feel like we're almost done, but there's so much to do still. So I kind of just tackle things systematically as we go through. So just kind of do one piece at a time. Next thing I'm doing is running our power wires going back to the main board. Now generally what I'm doing at this stage is I'm trying to think about everything that needs to happen. So our main power wire here, we've got two sections of it. That goes from the nose, which will be that direction, comes back, going to come through one of our through fittings and goes into our two batteries, battery 1, battery 2. And then we've got to make a plug up for our BEC outputs, and those are going to go to the lighting system and to the afterburner light. So just trying to get all of this stuff systematically finished. I'm pretty sure that we've decided on this layout for the through fittings, so all of our stuff for this side will come through here, that side there. That's going to take a bit of organizing when we put the tray in. This one's kind of just for miscellaneous stuff. Undecided right now if we're going to put the lighting system on the board. I really don't like that because it's kind of messy and ugly. I'd rather just put it on the side of the fuselage. Other benefit of putting it on the side is it doesn't get affected by the tray going in and out, right? So if we put our lighting system on the side like this, we still have access to it. All of our leads can come up, plug in, and it doesn't interfere with our board because our board only comes out to about this area right here, so there's a bit of a gap between there. So lots of room for lines and stuff to come up the side. All right, so battery leads are done up. This is, I put the covering on here with my little special tool that I have. It's a little tool that clamps around this and you inject it with hot glue. So those are done. So we're gonna get those run in the front of the fuselage to the equipment area, and then we are going to cut out our through fittings. Okay, so we got our power leads run forward, and while we were back in this section, I was working on the nose gear lighting. So put spiral wrap around those guys so we can run them and they're not going to rub on anything. And the other thing we did was our 3 lights that are right there. Got those all joined together, so there's only one lead now that will power those 3 LEDs. This is one of those scenarios where using the little SKYMASTER expansion boxes as possible. I don't like them because it's just one more thing to connect everything to. So this is such a more simple way to deal with it. So now what we can do is we've got our 2 gear leads here. So one is for our white light, one is for the colored LEDs. And we can run those off of port 5 and 6, which are landing lights. And if we want to, which we'll probably do, we are going to run a gear input right here. So we're going to have our nav lights and then our gear light. The gear light can tie in to the Zykoy failsafe / sequencer. So we can just put it in port number 3 and we can have that port in a on condition when the gear is down, which will turn those lights on and simplifies everything. So we're going to get our through fittings cut now and get those mounted in the board. All right, guys, if you're following along with the SU-30 build from SKYMASTER, some of this will look familiar to you. So with the SU-30, we had initially set everything up like this, and this is not correct. And part of the reason it's not correct is we've got some lines going between our 2 central boxes, which is not good. So if you're a fan of the channel and you've been following along on the builds and you're kind of copying what we did on the SU, don't copy what we did on the SU. This is more appropriate. I'm just showing you this because we're kind of following this for the F-14, but not really. So one of the differences here is we are not using a second central box, right? So we're just using that one central box. The important thing with on the SU, you have these two, this lead going in between these two. The positive needs to be out of the bus line. So the E2 port going into R1, this is what sends the signal back to the the secondary central box because the CB400s are primary. Anyways, so the positive needs to be out of the bus line. So this is just signal and negative line that comes between these two, but not really appropriate because we're not using the second central box. So this gives you a quick rundown of what we're doing. So to the simplest one here is our R900 is going into R3, or in this case, EXT1 port. It's not labeled as R3. We've got our primary. Primary, we're just going to have our E1 going into B on the Cortex. Clone, we're going to have E1 going into A, and then we're also going to have E2 going into R2. So that's how we're going to set this guy up. And yeah, so that's basically what we're doing. Previously, we would run the clone into the primary, the E2 port into the R2 port. So, but anyways, that gives you a bit of a rundown here on how we are setting things up. Yes, we set up these aircraft for this owner with a clone. Same thing we do here in the shop for my aircraft, but quick little description on what we're doing. All right, we've got our through fittings installed. Those are just glued in place with some CA, some thick CA, and that stuff is good. So again, just kind of sequentially going through things here. Just got my M-speed sensor geared up. So we've got our lead that we're not using, the red lead all bundled up, and we're using our black lead to send the signal to the system. So this is going to be buried underneath the board. So it'll be hidden underneath there, and this lead will just come up through here and plug into our telemetry system. All right, so we'll be using the E4 expander from Jetty. This is going to provide us with enough ports. So what this does is it takes one of these ports and turns it into 4, which we will need because we've got our R900 here. We're probably going to put turbine 1, turbine 2 in those two guys. And then EXT4 is going to be all of our other telemetry sensors, which is going to be our M-speed, our compressor, our fail-safe on the gear system, and I think that covers everything. So that's installed with Velcro, and our leads will just come up and plug right in there, nice and clean. Also got our lighting controller mounted back there, so we've got our wire done up for the lighting controller as well. This end plugs right into the SBEC on the Central Box 400, so those will come underneath the board and through. We've got our front leads already run there, and the other thing I did was make up our plug for our nose steering, which is done as well. So that's just one of our 3D mounts, and just goes in there nice and clean. So we've got a couple more wire leads to do up. These are going to be, number 1 is going to be our main gear control here. So we need that control for the Zykoy fail-safe sequencer to go to the board. And then we also need a telemetry lead to go from here to the board. And then we also need another lead to go from port number 3 to our lighting controller to control the landing gear lights. All right, next thing to tackle is our lighting system. So we've got 5 open ports right now, and we've got 7 leads to deal with. So what we're going to do here is we've got these 2 leads which go to the wing tips. We're going to solder those guys together and just have a single connector. Our left and right lights, which are these guys right here, we're going to have those go to a single connector, and those are the fuselage lights, these guys right there, and then the green ones on the other side. And then we've got our tail lights, so these are all the ones on the vertical stabs. So we'll keep those individual. So there's 3 individuals, so we can have solid, flashing, whatever. But that's how we're going to pair things up. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is going to be perfect for the lighting controller. And of course, we're shortening all these leads because there's no reason to have all of this excess wire bundled down there. So we'll get all this stuff soldered and figured out and sorted out, and then we're going to plug those into the lighting controller. All of this basically is working towards getting our main tray installed. All right, so we've got all of our wires run to our lighting controller. I'm not sure if this is the layout that we're going to use, but they're there. We're going to have everything bundled up as it goes through the board. So you can see our light wires bundled up. And what I'm going to do is go through all of our connections and bundle up 1 through 12, our power leads and everything. Those will be bundled, so it'll be easy to just feed those through and we know exactly which ones are going where. This side obviously, and then our other ones that are going to our RXs and all that. So I've done some of our EXT leads here. So these are our R3 EXT leads for our on-off, our Cortex, and our primary EXT leads. So that'll just come to this area and those run forward to the front of the aircraft. More organizing going on here with our main board in preparation to get this installed. So what have we done different here? Obviously our Cortex has been installed, so we installed and bound our R3, which is our on-off switch. And I ran the antennas underneath because they don't really need to be exposed anywhere. So we've got those going underneath, and that's plugged into our switch port there. So that's all set up on the radio. We've got our primary receiver installed on a 3D printed mount. So our Rec 7, so that's installed. So E1 goes into Cortex, E2, which is another output, goes into RX2 right here. We've got our Cortex going into RX1, and then we've got an extra power lead, which comes from our port number 16, which on our radio is our gyro sense channel. So that just provides an additional power supply to the Cortex. So that stuff is done. When we feed those EXT extensions or programming extensions through here, one of them is going to be going to the Cortex, one of them is going to the EXT on the primary receiver, and the other one is going to the EXT port on the R3. So the only thing to add into this entire system is we're going to have a clone mounted probably on one of the walls here beside the board, and that clone is going to go into port B on the Cortex. So we can also do our programming now on the Cortex, which is a good time to do it. So then it's done and out of the way. So we'll plug batteries into here. We will turn the power on our radio, and we can turn the power on our system. So this won't bind right now or won't start up right now because we haven't taught the Cortex, and that's fine. So what we can do is we'll take our programming plug or our bind plug, install it in our programming port, and you'll see the blue flash. So initially here we want to set this up for one receiver, which is fine. So it flashes quickly and then it changes to a slow blink now that it recognizes that it's jetty, and single blink means single receiver. Now we can always go in afterwards and change that in the radio, but right now this is programmed. So we're going to turn our radio system off. Okay, so now that that's done, we want to take our plug and move it to port number A on the Cortex. This is a very important step because it won't work unless you do this. So now we turn this back on. Just turn the volume off on the radio, and this is going to go into programming mode now. And double bump. So we got right aileron, left aileron, forward elevator, back elevator, right rudder, left rudder, and gyro off. There we go. So that's all programmed. Pull the bind plug out, turn the power off, and now she's good. So when we turn this back on now, everything should work as normal. So this should go into blue flashes or white flashes and double bump, and we're good. So gyro's in the off setting, gyro's in the on setting. So that is now programmed. So right now we are pretty much ready to install this board, but we need to just organize our wires going into each of the 3 through fittings, and then we'll be ready to put this in the aircraft. All right, so we got all of our leads split into the 3 different groups. Our board is in place. Now all of our wires need to be hooked up. This is a bit of a chore for sure, but with everything properly labeled and run to the correct input through fitting, should go fairly simple. All right, so we've got everything plugged in there. Now the only thing we have to think about is our pilot. So we need a lead coming from the radio system. We can use a Y cable, and that's going to come to our random motion generator. So it only needs to be one lead, but that is something that we need to figure out. Now ideally we want to have a channel dedicated to the pilots so we can turn them off. So need to do a little bit of thinking on that. So next thing we need to work on is our battery plugs. So we're going to have 4 identical batteries on this aircraft. So we're going to have 2 3-cell LiPos on this side, 2 3-cell LiPos on that side. So our battery plugs are just going to go along the bottom here. So we'll have 2 XT60 plugs there. And we are going to do all of our EXT plugs, like this guy there, right up this portion right here. So what we need to do is put a template in here or build a template to have a piece of wood that mounts in this location. So I cut a piece of cardboard out. This actually is the Electron retract boxes. I keep all of them because this is great template cardboard. It's stiff and it works really well and it's very thin. So this is the exact opening, so we'll extend this out a little bit and then we will get this guy done up in wood. But essentially, like I said, we're going to have our XT60 plugs here. We'll have to do another one for the other side, but it'll only be the bottom portion. And then we'll do all of our plugs that I just showed you for all of our extension lines right in this section right there. All right, so we've got our first plate on the left-hand side cut out. The penciled area is the area that is the opening, and this is our overlay, so that's where we're going to fasten it. So what we need to do is we need to get our holes cut in here and we need to get our labels laid out. So cool thing about this setup is we can use exactly this same label. So I'm going to print this guy again and that's going to work good. Now when we print these on our bamboo printer, right there, our X1 carbon, what I'm using is a 0.2 nozzle. Now the 0.2 nozzle, the common nozzle that everybody uses or most people use is a 0.4 nozzle. To get that really fine detail, the 0.2 nozzle is necessary. It takes a little bit longer to print, but works really well for printing those labels. All right, getting closer with the organizing here. So we got our labels all printed. These turned out awesome. This is an exact duplicate of the one we used in the SU, so that'll go like that. We've got battery 1 and 2, and turbine battery right, turbine battery left. Now, the thing with these batteries is they're all the same battery. They're all a 3-cell LiPo, so that's not going to matter at all. But it's nice to know what does what and what is plugged into what. So anyways, we just painted this, so we're going to let those cure. I did put the receiver portions in already, so they're all painted to match everything and they're nice and clean. So we're just going to let that cure and then we'll get this all assembled. All right, so we've got our boards assembled here, all ready to go. So what we can do now is we can get everything assembled and installed in this setup. So initially I had the batteries flipped around, but because these battery leads are a little bit shorter than these guys, it makes more sense to put our primary batteries on the, when you're looking at the front of the plane, the right-hand side. So not that it really makes a difference. And we've got our EXT leads or programming leads. So this is the female part on the power box setup. So we just need to do our crimp on the other setup and then just plug it in the back. But those are awesome. Now these battery connectors are available on our website. And there's multiple different styles on the website. These are the glue-in versions. We also have some angled glue-in versions. We've got some screw-down versions, some angled screw-down versions. So when you do these up, you put the wires through the back. I solder them on the XT60 connector, and the XT60 connector actually clips in place. So it goes clip, and it doesn't pull out. There's no gluing of the connector required. They are awesome. All right, so I just soldered up our plugs for our XT60 connectors. And those are done. So the next thing to do is to bolt our nose section on. The nice thing about the nose section is it mirrors this wood piece perfectly, so it hides that. We don't have to paint that. And once the nose section's on and installed and we're happy with it, we can start working on our battery installation, which on this plane is going to be quite simple. So we got our nose cone battery support installed. That's Loctited in place. Now we did quite a few things here. Number one, we figured out what we're doing with batteries. So initially I kind of thought we're going to put all the batteries there. Then what we did is we ended up printing these battery holders. Now these are exactly the same as the one we did for the BDX. I just scaled them down, so it's essentially the same thing. I obviously made it a little bit more narrow so it holds one battery on its side, and made it a little bit shorter, Velcro slots, all that stuff. So I also cut our through fitting holes right there for our 20 by 20 square through fitting, so we'll get those installed. And our black marks here are because we're going to use high sol and get these things glued on to the tray just like that. So we're doing 1, 2, these through fittings are for the underside, so we're going to have 2 of them on the underside, like that. And the lead can just come through and go into there. So that's going to work out good, nice support and nice battery installation, clean and simple. So we got 4 of these guys to install, and you can see there what the batteries look like in place. Now the batteries we're putting in here are 4,000 milliamps. They're actually kind of the same dimensions as this 3300. They're just a little bit shorter. So essentially they're the same as this pretty much. So we're going to mix up some high sol and get these guys installed. All right, so we got our trays installed. We got our through fittings installed. That is going to work perfectly. So the bottom ones, we shifted them forward a little bit more. So not much, just a little bit. So they're tucked up here. So there'll be plenty of lead to come through the through fitting and then go right into our battery connector. So that is beautiful. We're going to let those cure a little bit before we do anything. But one of the big next things to do is do a gear cycle on this aircraft. I do need some help to do that, but she's ready to turn on. Now, usually when I get to this step in a project like this, what I will do is I'm not going to turn the aircraft on until I have some help. And the reason for that is I don't want the gear to accidentally cycle in the wrong direction. Even though we've gone through everything, we've made sure we're happy with everything, I'm not going to take the chance, especially with something like this where I can't move it, support it, do any of that stuff by myself. So we're going to leave that until probably tomorrow. In the video, it won't seem like much at all. But we're going to leave that till tomorrow, till we have some help. That'll allow the glue on the front there to cure. And what we can do now is we can move back into getting some of our other stuff sorted out, like our cockpits, pilots, canopy, you know, that kind of stuff. All right, so while we're waiting for our high sol to cure, we're working on the cockpit setup here. The cockpit kind of ties into everything else that we need to do, so I want to make sure that we're happy with everything and everything's good before we button down the main board there. But we also, if you remember from the first videos, this cross brace came out during our unboxing, and we're going to reinforce the cross brace here, the other brace on the front. So I've got this temporarily installed with some CA just to get it in the right spot. And now I'm going to use some high sol and get it stuck in place. So this bolts in, the front cockpit here bolts in on the back. The front just rests on that side support. And what I did was I cut some angles here on the front portions of the front cockpit tub just to allow the airlines to pass through. So nothing really major, but it was impossible to get this cockpit in without those little cutouts. So it's definitely a bit of a process here. So when you go to put this in, what you need to do is, if you never saw the first video, it's I kind of covered it in there. But so basically what you do here to put this back together is you got to get the cockpit tub in with the seat out. You got to get that in place there. And then our front instrument cluster slides in and gets supported on that front structure like that. And then the cockpit tub comes back, tucks up underneath. So it's definitely a bit of a challenge, but it is perfectly possible to get that all reinstalled. But what this allows us to do as well is find out where we're going to put our plugs for our pilots' moving heads. So our trays that we installed are all good. High sol's all cured. I just have the batteries sitting on top here because we haven't put Velcro in them yet. So that's also an option actually, I guess, as well too. If all 4 batteries will fit on top, it can be run that way, or we can run the other one on the bottom. But we're getting ready for the first time to turn the aircraft on with everything plugged in. Now this is a bit of a milestone because you know, we've done these systems individually. Now everything's been plugged in. We've double checked everything. Polarity's all good on everything. And on a plane like this, we need to enlist some help. So Generally, what I like to do at this time is we have somebody supporting the front, somebody supporting the back, and the whole reason is if we turn the airplane on and something goes awry, like the gear starts to come up, which has happened, you have somebody there supporting the plane. So that's why I always like to have some extra sets of hands. So we've got batteries hooked up. We are going to, there's air in the air system, and we're going to turn this plane on. If everything's good, then we're going to do a gear cycle and confirm that everything works. So, good times. Turn the model on. Ready? Yes. Oh, there goes the gear. And that is why we have people helping to hold the aircraft. Okay, our batteries are a little bit low, so I'm going to unplug the compressor battery just to get that out of the way.
Yeah, it jumped a little.
So yeah, so what happened was the gear went into the up condition and then went back into the down condition. So that's something we'll have to take a look at. Definitely concerning when it does that. That just has to do with the valves, the sequencer, so we got to go in and make sure that we're happy with everything and how everything's set up. Now sometimes the Jetronic valves like to start in a certain condition, so in this case we may have them reversed and they're starting in the gear up condition, and we want to flip those lines around so it starts in the gear down condition. So those are the little gremlins we need to work out. Okay, so we still haven't figured out the startup issue. I'll work on that. I just want to do a gear cycle and confirm that everything works as it should. So we're going to go up with the plane, and gear is going up. Nice.
That's nice and fast.
Okay, doors aren't happy, so gear's coming down. Okay, plane down. All right, so also last night we got our pilots fastened into our seats. Now generally what I'll do to get the pilots fastened is use goop. I've also used like safety wire in the past, that works fine. Obviously the nice thing about goop is you can't see it, and it also is, I mean it's permanent, but you could peel the guy off if you really wanted to. So we got them installed, pulled their boots off. This guy's an amputee, so we folded his lower legs in. But they fit perfectly, and I just position them so they're not touching the ejection handles here or whatever, but and their heads are going to move freely. So anyways, those guys are done. So when I installed our battery holders here, I made sure I spaced them off the center portions, the support there a little bit. Reason for that is so we can get our Velcro up and through just like that. Now if you run those tight, or if you install the Velcro when the tray is glued down, the downside could be that maybe you accidentally glue the Velcro in place, and that may not be such a big deal until you have to go change the Velcro, which could be not a lot of fun and not being able to get it out. So this way it ensures that we're able to get the Velcro in and out, and it works quite well. So yes, we are going all over the place, but we are in the final stages of this aircraft, so that's the way it happens. I'm just charging these batteries up individually, so that's what we're waiting on, and we're working on other things as we do this. So both of our receiver batteries are now installed, and I've got our fueler set up here. So this is a Y-fitting 6mm Festo. This is going to get bolted down to our plate here, and then we've got our two little runs going to our valves. When you fill up this aircraft, the chuck plugs in there, we open up, and it fills. So what we'll do is we'll get this started filling and fill up our UATs so they have an opportunity to soak the filter. All right. I'm laughing in frustration, mostly. So a lot of you guys think that I don't run across roadblocks, and you may think that my projects just go together perfectly. That is not always the case. It is 20 after 8 p.m. right now on a Friday. I've been fighting with this stupid gear controller and valve setup for over 4 hours now, and I finally got it solved. I'll tell you guys the issue I was having, and this is one of those things that the valves kind of just get out of sequence maybe. So yeah, it's a little tough to explain, but I'll give you the problem that we were trying to solve, and I'll tell you kind of the steps that we went through. Okay, so first problem was when we turn the plane off. I'm going to turn it off now with the gear down, and we turn the plane back on. The gear was collapsing. It was going up and back down. So the Zykoy sequencer, it kind of goes through an initialization and then it goes to gear down. So problem was that in the gear down position, our valves were red. These are high flow valves. Unless you've used them, this may not mean much to you, but on one position this will be red, the other position it will be off. Your valves here are fixed. This has to be your gear up. This has to be your gear down line. Now on the other Jetronic valves that we've used, which are sort of like this, we just flip those air lines. It's really simple. But on these ones, you have to go through the programming sequence, sort of, because you really, I just keep pushing buttons until it works, and it works. So the gear down needs to be light off condition, and I'm kind of telling this to myself in case I run across this in the future, I can refer back to this video. So anyways, with this, like this, when we turn this off and on, these now have pressure going into the gear down side always. Oh my gosh, that was frustrating. So we finally got it licked and everything is working perfectly. So we can do a gear cycle here. We've got pressure, our compressor's hooked up right now. The system's holding pressure beautifully. It's not changing at all, which is awesome. And that is definitely part of the reason when we started this project, I went through all of the air cylinders, lubricated them, sealed them, checked them, and that is the result right there. So if you don't do that on your aircraft builds, you're way more likely to have a leak, especially at this point, and then you're chasing leaks with equipment installed, which is an absolute nightmare. So anyways, let's do a gear cycle on this thing finally. So we've got the plane supported. This plane is a real challenge because you can't just lay it on the belly. Obviously you can't lift it with one person. So we've got the nose supported on a chair, box, foamies. The nose wheel is off the ground. The mains are actually touching. So when these come back down, it's actually lifting the plane up. And we've got the rear end supported here on the structure for the tail cones. So that's just one of my stands, a towel, and this raises it up enough, but not enough to get the gear off the board. Anyways, let's do a gear cycle, and the compressor is going to turn on, so you'll hear that, but I'll go up, and then I'll go down. So gear up. Comes up beautifully. Doors will close. We're at 82 PSI. We're going to go gear down. Doors open. Gear comes down. You'll see it lift the plane. Awesome. Works so good. And we are in the final steps of this plane. All right, so I just went in and did my programming on my Zykoy turbines for this aircraft. So pretty simple. Obviously, we do the radio programming, and I don't know what the fuel systems hold, so I just put them at 4.5 liters each. Just looking at the tanks, I think they're going to be about 4.5 liters. They could be 5.5 liters, but anyways, they're set to 4.5 liters right now. So that part's done. Last thing I want to check here is our afterburner lights. I haven't checked those yet, so let's see what they look like. So everything should just work because they're part of the Central Box 400. Oh yeah! Very cool. Awesome. And just to show you again, that last clip, we had the trim down on the turbines. So I've unplugged the batteries, and now our trim is back up, or trimmed up. So now they'll be solid right there. So anyways, they do work as intended. All right, guys, and that wraps up video number 6 in the build series of the huge SKYMASTER XXL F14. This video, we got a lot accomplished. We got tons of the detail work done. Obviously, the gear stuff was a huge frustration and struggle, but we are almost done this beautiful, huge aircraft. Next video, we're just finishing up the final details. We're gonna do engine runs and just the final setup. Now this brings up a good point for the lighter side of RC After Dark. Now the After Dark channel, today's Friday, tomorrow the After Dark channel, we're doing another live and we will be doing the engine run-ups on that After Dark episode. So if you're a subscriber of the After Dark channel, and you watch and you're online at the time, you'll be able to see the engine run-ups on this beautiful F14 before this video or that next video is actually released. So definitely encourage you to check it out. The live streams are fun. I love interacting with you guys. It's a blast. So thanks guys so much for watching the build series. Cool thing about this aircraft is we're gonna finish this build series up and then Montana Jets is happening right away, and that's where this thing's getting maidened. So stay tuned. We have some really cool maidens coming up of all the aircraft we've built over this past winter, plus projects still in the queue. So thanks guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.